When we talk about wealth and taxation, the conversation isn't just about numbers, it's about power, fairness, and who gets to shape the rules. But how do these debates actually unfold in the media? More importantly, how do they influence what the public believes? In this video, we will explore how German public service media talk shows frame the debate on wealth taxation. Are they fostering informed discussions or just reinforcing existing biases? How do their guest selections, framing strategies, and storytelling techniques shape public opinion and ultimately policy decisions? Wealth inequality is one of the most pressing economic issues of our time, and taxation is a key tool in addressing it. Yet, whether wealth taxes are seen as a fair solution or a dangerous policy often depends on how the media presents them. By understanding these dynamics, we can become more critical media consumers and engage with economic debates in a more informed way. I will break down the key arguments for and against wealth taxation, analyze how talk shows construct economic narratives, and examine the broader implications for public discourse and democracy. So let's dive in and see how media shape the way we think about wealth and fairness. This video is a popularization of my master thesis at Vienna University of Economic and Business for the general public. Enjoy! Wealth inequality has become one of the most pressing socio-economic challenges of the 21st century, and Germany stands out as one of the most unequal countries in Europe. Recent estimates indicate that the wealthiest 1% of Germans control over 30% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 50% collectively own less than 3%. This stark disparity underscores not only an entrenched concentration of wealth, but also a widening economic divide. As discussions around economic justice and fiscal policy intensify, wealth-based taxation has emerged as one of the most polarizing policy tools. Advocates argue it is essential to reducing inequality and ensuring fairer wealth distribution. Opponents, however, warn of potential downsides, such as discouraging investment and triggering capital flight. These debates extend beyond politics and economics. They shape public perception of fairness, opportunity, and the role of government in redistribution. So, where does the public service media fit into all of this? With their mandate to inform, educate, and serve the public interest, public broadcasts play a crucial role in shaping economic discourse. But how do they frame the issue of wealth taxation? Are they fostering a nuanced, evidence-based discussion, or are they just reinforcing existing biases? Let's explore. Before we unpack how media frames wealth taxation, let's make sure we are all on the same page. What exactly do we mean by wealth-based taxes? Wealth-based taxes, or simply wealth taxes, are a specific form of taxation that target an individual's or entity's financial assets. Generally, they fall into two main categories: net wealth taxes and transfer taxes. Net wealth taxes are levied on individuals' total assets after deducting liabilities. These taxes are typically applied on the annual basis to ensure that wealth, rather than just income, contributes to public finances. On the other hand, transfer taxes are triggered when wealth is passed from one person to another, either through inheritance or as a gift. Our focus here will be on inheritance as a primary transfer tax. Germany has a complex history with wealth taxation. The net wealth tax was abolished in 1997 following a ruling by a federal constitutional court, primarily due to inconsistencies in the valuation of assets. Previously, it was levied at 1% of net wealth above a certain exemption threshold. Despite its abolition, discussions about its reintroduction continue, as estimates suggest that a modernized net wealth tax could generate between 10 and 20 billion euros annually, depending on its design and exemption levels. However, several challenges remain. First, accurately valuing wealth is complex, particularly when it comes to non liquid assets like real estate, business properties, and private collections. The cost of administering and collecting the tax is estimated to range between 4 and 8% of the revenue generated. Additionally, there are concerns over tax avoidance, as high net worth individuals might move their wealth abroad or use sophisticated financial strategies to reduce their taxable assets. Some studies suggest that 30 to 50% of potential revenue could be lost due to such avoidance mechanisms. Meanwhile, the inheritance tax remains in effect, though its design has been the subject of intense debate. The tax is progressive, meaning that larger inheritance are subject to higher tax rates, which currently range from 7 to 50%. The amount paid depends on both relationship between the deceased and the heir and the value of the inheritance. Closer family members, such as spouses and children, generally benefit from lower rates and higher exemptions, while distant relatives or non-family members face higher tax burdens. However, despite its progressive structure, inheritance tax contributes less than 1% of Germany's total tax revenues and circa 0.3% of GDP, largely due to the generous exemptions that favor wealthy business heirs. A major point of contention is the preferential treatment of business inheritance. Heirs of business worth over 26 million often receive near total exemptions, allowing large fortunes to be transferred with minimal taxation. Between 2009 and 2015, more than 150 billion euros in business assets were passed down tax-free. The current debate in Germany revolves around two key questions. Should the net wealth tax be reinstated to generate additional revenue and reduce inequality? And should the inheritance tax be reformed to close loopholes and ensure the fairer taxation of large wealth transfers? Some propose revising exemption thresholds, while others advocate for a flat inheritance tax that applies uniformly across different asset types. Ultimately, the decision to implement, reintroduce, or reform these taxes is fundamentally political, shaped by competing ideologies and interests. To understand how the public perceives wealth-based taxes, we need to examine who is shaping the conversation. Public service media operate under a dual mandate. They serve as informers of the public while also functioning as market-driven entities. This dual role creates tensions that influence how economic issues, including wealth taxation, are framed in public debates. The core mission of public service media is to educate and inform the public. Their mandate is to provide fact-based, balanced coverage, ensuring citizens can engage with economic policies in a well-informed, democratic manner. Ideally, this means presenting a broad spectrum of viewpoints and delivering in-depth policy discussions free from commercial influence. However, despite their public service missions, media organizations must compete for viewership and generate engagement. This commercial pressure often pushes content towards sensationalism, focusing on controversy over complexity. Talk shows and news outlets prioritize dramatic conflicts, emotional storytelling, and high-profile personalities to maintain audience interests, sometimes at the expense of critical, policy-focused discussions. These structural tensions shapes which arguments gain visibility and which remain on the margins. So, how does this dynamic play out in coverage of wealth taxation? Let's analyze the key framing strategies. Media do not merely reflect reality, they actively shape it. This is particularly evident in debates around highly contested policies like wealth taxation, where media narratives influence public perception through agenda setting, selection bias, and sensationalism. Agenda setting. Public perceptions of economic policies is influenced by which topics the media highlight and how they prioritize certain aspects. By focusing on specific risks or benefits, media outlets shape what the public perceives as the most pressing economic issues, sometimes amplifying fears of economic instability or overlooking structural inequalities. Selection bias. Not all voices are given equal representation in media discussions. There is a tendency to favor established economic elites, business leaders, and political figures over progressive economists, labor unions, or grassroots activists. This creates an imbalance in economic discourse, reinforcing mainstream economic ideologies while marginalizing alternative perspectives. Sensationalism. Complex economic debates are often oversimplified and dramatized for entertainment value. Media outlets rely on polarizing narratives rather than engaging in nuanced policy discussions. Sensationalist framing can distort public understanding, creating emotional reactions rather than rational, evidence based discussions. The media's role in shaping economic discourse is critical, given its capacity to influence public understanding and attitudes towards complex economic policies and principles. Through its coverage, the media not only reports on economic events, but also participates in the formation of economic ideologies and the framing of policy debates. This involvement has significant implications for public knowledge and the overall democratic process, as it affects how economic realities are perceived and what policy options are considered legitimate or desirable. By understanding these media practices, we can critically assess how public debates on wealth taxation are shaped and whose interests are being served in the process. Research on media coverage of economic issues focuses on print media or TV news, but talk shows remain an underexplored space despite their unique ability to shape public opinion. This research seeks to fill that gap, analyzing how public service media talk shows in Germany construct narratives around wealth based taxation and redistribution policies. Unlike static print media, talk shows are dynamic and performative, blending conversation, entertainment, and information in a way that makes complex economic issues more accessible to the public. The interactive and performative nature of talk shows. Talk shows thrive on immediacy, interaction, and audiovisual engagement. They are not just passive news sources, but live or seemingly real-time conversations where hosts, guests, and even audiences actively engage in a debate. This contrasts with print media, which presents curated content that readers consume at their own pace. The democratizing potential and its limitations. Talk shows are often praised for democratizing media discourse, allowing not just experts but also politicians, celebrities, and ordinary citizens to participate. Unlike newspapers, which operate as one way communication platforms, talk shows encourage dialogue through audience interactions, live discussions, and social media engagement. This creates an illusion of inclusivity. But does it truly empower diverse voices? This raises an important question. Do talk shows actively work to democratize economic discourse by including diverse ideological perspectives? Or do they, like traditional media, ultimately reinforce existing power structures? To answer this, I analyzed public service media talk shows in Germany that discuss wealth taxation. Here's what I found. The analysis of public service media talk shows in Germany reveals a near equal distribution of arguments both for and against taxation. This balanced representation suggests that talk shows provide a platform for multiple perspectives, allowing both proponents and opponents to present their views. However, while both sides are given space, the way these arguments are framed can significantly influence how the public perceives wealth-based taxation. Despite this balance in representation, the discourse remains highly polarized, shaped by distinct ideological, moral, and economic perspectives. Rather than simply debating technical aspects of taxation, discussions on wealth-based taxes often reflect deeper societal beliefs about fairness, economic governance, and the role of the state in wealth distribution. The debate over wealth-based taxation in German talk shows can be categorized into four distinct themes, each reflecting different dimensions of the argument. These themes reveal the complexity of discussion and how different narratives shape public perception. Let's have a look at each theme. First theme, systemic flaws in Germany's taxation system, highlights a shared belief among both supporters and opponents that the current tax system has significant inefficiencies. However, their perspective on the problem differ drastically. Opponents argue that the issue lies in excessive government spending and poor fiscal management rather than insufficient revenue. They claim that adding new taxes will only expand an already bloated system rather than fixing its fundamental inefficiencies. Proponents, however, argue that the real problem is the disproportionate distribution of the tax burden, where the ultra-wealthy benefit from loopholes and tax privileges that allow them to contribute less relative to their wealth. They see wealth taxation as a necessary tool to rebalance the system and ensure fairer contributions from those at the top. The second theme, conservatives versus progressive moral values, underscores the ideological divide shaping wealth tax narratives. Conservative perspectives frame wealth as the product of personal effort and meritocracy, emphasizing individual success and the right to intergenerational wealth transfer. From this viewpoint, wealth taxes are perceived as punitive measures that unfairly target those who have worked hard and invested wisely. Progressive perspectives, on the other hand, challenge this assumption that wealth accumulation is purely individualistic. They argue that economic success is built on social infrastructure and collective contributions, making taxation a justified mechanism to redistribute wealth and uphold democratic fairness. This ideological clash is fundamental to how talk shows present and interpret taxation policies. The third theme, societal impacts, ideology, and practicality, brings the debate beyond economic efficiency into broader questions of social justice and policy feasibility. Proponents emphasize that wealth-based taxes are essential for fostering social equity, funding public services, and addressing systemic injustices. They argue that these taxes enable equal opportunities, improve long-term social stability, and ensure that economic privilege does not translate into permanent inherited power. Opponents counter that the motivations behind wealth-based taxes are often ideological rather than pragmatic. They present taxation as a tool driven by envy rather than economic necessity, and argue that such policies are not only inefficient and administratively burdensome, but could also discourage investment and entrepreneurship. The final theme, economic implications of wealth taxation, reveals stark contrasts between fear-driven narratives and evidence-based counter-arguments. Opponents argue that taxing wealth leads to capital flight, reduced investments, and economic stagnation, particularly affecting Germany's small and medium-sized businesses. They claim that wealth taxation creates uncertainty, potentially harming economic growth and job creation. Proponents dispute these claims, emphasizing that well-designed wealth taxes are highly targeted at the ultra-rich and large corporations rather than small businesses or middle-class earners. They argue that economic risks associated with wealth taxes are overstated and that such measures can generate sustainable public revenue without disrupting the broader economy. So, these four themes illustrate how wealth taxation debates are framed within broader ideological, moral, and economic worldviews. You can see now that whether wealth taxation is perceived as a necessary tool for economic justice or a threat to financial stability depends largely on how these narratives are constructed and amplified in the media. This is why talk shows, as a platform for public discourse, play such a crucial role in shaping public perception of wealth-based taxation. While these platforms allow for diverse perspectives, they are influenced by structural constraints, participant selection, and framing mechanisms that ultimately shape the discourse. A key finding is the imbalance in argumentation between pro and anti taxation perspectives. Pro taxation arguments were well structured, emphasizing structural inequities, redistribution, and societal benefits. However, they lacked direct counter arguments. Instead of engaging with systemic critiques of wealth concentration and tax loopholes, opponents focused on small businesses and middle-class property owners, shifting the debate away from the ultra-rich and big corporations. This narrowed the scope of discussion, limiting substantive exchanges between opposing views. This aligns with media theory, which highlights how selection and emphasis shape economic narratives. Anti-taxation participants were often upper middle class figures, family business owners, or small property inheritance, who framed taxation as a threat to financial security. In contrast, pro-taxation voices criticizes wealth concentration, yet the absence of ultra-wealthy representatives prevented direct engagement. As a result, debates centered on emotionally charged yet statistically marginal cases rather than systemic economic concerns. The framing of economic narratives also influences public perceptions. Discussions prioritized emotional storytelling over data-driven analysis, reinforcing personal anecdotes over systemic critique. But what does this mean for public debate? From a theoretical perspective, these findings align with broader discussions on media's role as a gatekeeper of public discourse. Talk shows, despite their potential to function as counter-public spheres, are shaped by structural constraints that limit their ability to challenge hegemonic economic perspectives. These constraints include audience engagement strategies, participant selection, and the need to maintain accessibility while sustaining commercial viability. As a result, systemic critiques are often overshadowed by emotionally engaging but less statistically significant narratives. Ultimately, these framing mechanisms have broader implications for public perception and policy discourse. By shaping how taxation is discussed, talk shows influence whether audiences perceive wealth taxes as fair redistribution or punitive policy. The reliance on personal narratives, ideological framing, and emotional storytelling over empirical evidence affects voter attitudes, policy preferences, and political viability of wealth taxation reforms. In conclusion, the discourse on wealth-based taxes in German public service talk shows transcends the technical fiscal arguments, emerging as a proxy for broader ideological struggles over societal values, economic justice, and democratic integrity. While these platforms hold the potential to foster informed public debate, they remain constrained by structural, commercial, and performative pressures. Addressing these limitations is essential for public service media to realize the potential as spaces for meaningful dialogue capable of advancing a more informed and engaged public discourse on issues of wealth, fairness, and societal well-being. The analysis of public service talk shows has shown how wealth taxation debates are framed through selective narratives, emotional appeals, and guest selection biases. This raises an important question. How can we, as media consumers, think critically about these biases and engage with economic discussions in a more informed way? The first step is to be aware of emotional framing and guest selection. Talk shows often rely on emotionally charged narratives to capture audience attention, which can oversimplify complex policy discussions. Similarly, the choice of guests play a significant role in shaping the debate. When business owners and middle class property holders dominate anti taxation arguments while systemic critiques of wealth inequality are presented without direct opposition, it creates an imbalance in the discussion. Recognizing the strategies allows us to analyze debates more critically rather than passively accepting the narratives presented. Another way to counter media bias is to seek alternative sources of information. Talk shows are just one platform where economic issues are discussed, but they do not necessarily offer the most comprehensive or balanced perspective. Exploring expert interviews, independent journalism, and data driven reports can help us develop a broader and more nuanced understanding of wealth taxation policies. Fact checking claims against reputable sources ensures that our perspectives are informed by evidence rather than rhetoric. Beyond consuming media critically, we should also engage in real discussions beyond TV drama. Talk shows often represent debates in highly polarized, argumentative formats, making it difficult to explore policy nuances. Engaging in civil, evidence based discussions with others, whether in academic settings, online forums, or community groups, allows for deeper reflection and a more constructive exchange of ideas. Moving beyond sound bites and ideological rhetoric creates space for richer, fact based conversations about taxation and economic policy. Finally, we must push for evidence based debates in public service media. As consumers, we have the power to demand that public broadcasters prioritize informative, balanced discussions over purely entertainment driven sensationalist content. This means advocating for fact based journalism, more diverse guest selection, and deeper policy analysis. Public service media should uphold their responsibility to inform rather than simply entertain, and holding them accountable helps ensure that media remains a space for meaningful public discourse. By thinking critically about the media bias, expanding our sources of information, engaging in deeper discussions, and pushing for evidence based reporting, we can better navigate the complexities of wealth taxation debates and contribute to a more informed and engaged society. Now that we have explored how public service talk shows shape the debate on wealth taxation, it's time to hear from you. Do you think that wealth based taxes are necessary to reduce inequality and fund essential public services? Or do you believe that they discourage investment and economic growth? How do you think media framing influences public opinion on this issue? I would love to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation in the comments and share your perspective. And if you found this discussion insightful, please share this video to keep the conversation going. The more perspectives we hear, the richer the debate becomes. Thank you for watching, and bye!